Chapter 11. The Bab's Stay in Kashan. On the eve of the Bab's arrival at Kashan, Haji Mirza Jani, surnamed Parpa, a noted resident of that city, dreamed that he was standing at a late hour in the afternoon at the gate of Attar, one of the gates of the city, when his eyes suddenly beheld the Bab on horseback, wearing, instead of his customary turban, the kulla, usually worn by the merchants of Persia. Before him, as well as behind him, marched a number of horsemen into whose custody he seemed to have been delivered. As they approached the gate, the Bab saluted him and said, "Haji Mirza Jani, we are to be your guest for 3 nights. Prepare yourself to receive us." When he awoke, the vividness of his dream convinced him of the reality of his vision. This unexpected apparition constituted in his eyes a providential warning, which he felt it his duty to heed and observe. He accordingly set out to prepare his house for the reception of the visitor, and to provide whatever seemed necessary for his comfort. As soon as he had completed the preliminary arrangements for the banquet which he had decided to offer the Bab that night, Haji Mirza Jani proceeded to the gate of Attar, and there waited for the signs of the Bab's expected arrival. At the appointed hour, as he was scanning the horizon, he descried in the distance what seemed to him a company of horsemen approaching the gate of the city. As he hastened to meet them, his eyes recognized the Bab, surrounded by his escort, dressed in the same clothes and wearing the same expression as he had seen the night before in his dream. Haji Mirza Jani joyously approached him and bent to kiss his stirrups. The Bab prevented him, saying, "We are to be your guest for 3 nights. Tomorrow is the day of Nowruz. We shall celebrate it together in your home." Muhammad Beg, who had been riding close to the Bab, thought him to be an intimate acquaintance of Haji Mirza Jani. Turning to him, he said, "I am ready to abide by whatever is the desire of the Sayyidi Bab. I would ask you, however, to obtain the approval of my colleague who shares with me the charge of conducting the Sayyidi Bab to Tehran." Haji Mirza Jani submitted his request and was met with a flat refusal. "I decline your suggestion," he was told. "I have been most emphatically instructed not to allow this youth to enter any city until his arrival at the capital. I have been particularly commanded to spend the night outside the gate of the city, to break my march at the hour of sunset, and to resume it the next day at the hour of dawn. I cannot depart from the orders that have been given to me." This gave rise to a heated altercation, which was eventually settled in favor of Muhammad Beg, who succeeded in inducing his opponent to deliver the Bab into the custody of Haji Mirza Jani, with the express understanding that on the 3rd morning he should safely deliver back his guest into their hands. Haji Mirza Jani, who had intended to invite to his home the entire escort of the Bab, was advised by him to abandon this intention. "No one but you," he urged, "should accompany me to your home." Haji Mirza Jani requested to be allowed to defray the expense of the horseman's 3-day stay in Kashan. "It is unnecessary," observed the Bab, "but for my will, nothing whatever could have induced them to deliver me into your hands. All things lie prisoned within the grasp of his might. Nothing is impossible to him. He removes every difficulty and surmounts every obstacle." The horsemen were lodged in a caravanserai in the immediate neighborhood of the gate of the city. Muhammad Beg, following the instructions of the Bab, accompanied him until they drew near the house of Haji Mirza Jani. Having ascertained the actual situation of the house, he returned and joined his companions. The night the Bab arrived in Kashan coincided with the eve preceding the 3rd Nowruz after the declaration of his mission, which fell on the 2nd day of the month of Rabi'uth Thani in the year AH 1263, AD 1847. On that same night, Sayyid Hussein Yazdi, who had previously, in accordance with the directions of the Bab, come to Kashan, was invited to the house of Haji Mirza Jani and introduced into the presence of his master. The Bab was dictating to him a tablet in honor of his host, when a friend of the latter, a certain Sayyid Abdul Baqi, who was noted in Kashan for his learning, arrived. The Bab invited him to enter, permitted him to hear the verses which he was revealing, but refused to disclose his identity. In the concluding passage of the tablet, which he was addressing to Haji Mirza Jani, he prayed in his behalf, supplicated the Almighty to illumine his heart with the light of divine knowledge, and to unloose his tongue for the service and proclamation of his cause. Unschooled and unlettered though he was, Haji Mirza Jani was able, by virtue of this prayer, to impress with his speech even the most accomplished divine of Kashan. He became endowed with such power that he was able to silence every idle pretender who dared to challenge the precepts of his faith. Even the haughty and imperious Mullah Jafar-i Naraki was unable, despite his consummate eloquence, to resist the force of his argument, and was compelled to acknowledge outwardly the merits of the cause of his adversary, though at heart he refused to believe in its truth. Syed Abdul-Baqi sat and listened to the Bab. He heard his voice, watched his movements, looked upon the expression of his face, and noted the words which streamed unceasingly from his lips, and yet failed to be moved by their majesty and power. Wrapped in the veils of his own idle fancy and learning, he was powerless to appreciate the meaning of the utterances of the Bab. He did not even trouble to inquire the name or the character of the guest into whose presence he had been introduced. Unmoved by the things he had heard and seen, he retired from that presence, unaware of the unique opportunity which, through his apathy, he had irretrievably lost. A few days later, when informed of the name of the youth whom he had treated with such careless indifference, he was filled with chagrin and remorse. It was too late, however, for him to seek his presence and atone for his conduct, for the Bab had already departed from Kashan. In his grief, he renounced the society of his fellow men and led, to the end of his days, a life of unrelieved seclusion. Among those who were privileged to meet the Bab in the home of Haji Mirza Jani was a man named Mihdi, who was destined at a later time in the year AH 1268, AD 1851-52, to suffer martyrdom in Tehran. He and a few others were, during those 3 days, affectionately entertained by Haji Mirza Jani, whose lavish hospitality earned him the praise and commendation of his master. To even the members of the Bab's escort he extended the same loving kindness, and, by his liberality and charm of manner, won their lasting gratitude. On the morning of the 2nd day after Nowruz, he, mindful of his pledge, delivered the prisoner into their hands, and, with a heart overflowing with grief, bade him a last and touching farewell. Chapter 12. The Bab's journey from Kashan